your team's phenomenal. I went a lot from directly working with you directly, and then as you guys expand, talking to Steven as account manager. Guy's absolute killer, able to handle everything properly and give a ton of attention to make sure everything's done. Working with Stefan too, absolute killer again, knows the stuff very well, very technical. Like, it feels like everything is addressed and handled. It doesn't feel, I think with a lot of agencies, there's a strong degradation in quality, at least at this like smaller stage where you talk to the founder and the founder's very competent, and then you go like one layer deeper and it feels like you basically, aren't even working with the same people anymore. Whereas as you start to hire more, increase headcount, it felt like I had a lot more support. It felt like, yeah, I'm getting the quality of a team without having to hire a team.
All right. Matthew Lucero. We got Matt in the house. Runs a pretty big cold email agency. You run cold email for, I believe, Smart Lead, right?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know who the great, the wonderful, the genius Matt Lucero is, give the people a little intro so they know.
Yeah, so my name is Matt. I run a B2B lead generation agency. We basically just use cold email to book meetings for our clients. So people come to us, they say, hey, Matt, we want more sales meetings. And so we set up email infrastructure, we scrape leads, we write scripts, we build campaigns, we run the campaigns, and we also have like appointment setters that book the calls too. So basically, we outsource sales development type agency.
Love it. And what is really interesting about your story is you've been working with Tony for a while. Take us back to why you originally hired Tony, which I think was like, a year ago, right? So we're
about a year ago now. Yep.
In May 2023 or 2024 rather.
Mm-hmm.
When did you hire Tony? Why did you initially hire Tony? Walk us through like the initial phase of working with him and what you got out of that.
Yeah, so this was like, it might have even been a little more than a year. It might have been April of last year, but I was, went from freelancer to just like growing the agency, starting to be more established, sign clients, get, my foot in the door. And I had never grown a business with employees. I had never did project management. I've never done anything kind of to the scale of what it needs to be to run a legitimate business. And so whenever I started to sign more and more people, things started to slowly fall apart. And so I knew that I needed something fixed. And so I had someone network that Tony worked with that ended up connecting us. And like whenever I got on a call with Tony, I knew he was the guy. Like I spoke with a couple other people, but Tony just stood out very clearly that he knew what he was talking about. He knew what he was doing. And so we start off small level engagement, just basically like helping out with like the very, very basic stuff like project management, how to structure things, how to get onboarding flows. And even that alone made like a massive difference. Like prior to engaging with you guys in any capacity at all, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was operationally just like my operational IQ was like zero. Like I had no foundation of anything related to this. So whenever things started to grow and, I got intro to Tony, that immediate engagement made such a huge difference. And then slowly it progressed into more large scale. You guys came together and, things have been like going a lot better ever since. Like I don't even know where I'd be without having you guys basically, working with me, but.
Love it. So Tony, do you want to ask any more follow-up questions about
your
time together? Because the backstory is like you were working with a bunch of clients, and then we partnered up several months into that. But yeah, so like dive into that because you're much more knowledgeable around the operation side of things than I am, obviously.
No, my question for Matt basically is when we started off, as you mentioned, you were like a solo founder, effectively freelancer that had a bunch of clients, and then through the transition, we slowly, got your first employee and went through that entire sort of, process map out, company brain map out, hired your first employee. What do you say in that phase before we sort of added on the automation? What would you say were the couple of things that stood out the most that you were able to carry on into the agency now?
It's really just like looking at things through the lens of like I just had a massive issue where I could just have everything in my brain and not put it on paper. And it was the problem that I had was I didn't even comprehend how I could write something out without my brain like melting. Like the concept of like writing an SOP and getting someone else to execute on it was so foreign to me that I had no concept of how to even do that. And it was I remember before working with you, it was like I just didn't even understand how I could possibly outsource something to a degree where someone would do it at a competent level. And one of the things I can think from that period before we were doing any sort of automation level stuff was just learning how to, number one, map out processes. Number two, build, not only like map them out, but build processes that are effective. And then also how to communicate those out to other people so that they can execute it on your behalf. That was like a big piece. And then also developing the processes around like, hey, whenever we ended up bringing someone on, what are the things, the ancillary things that we need to make sure that they're successful, so they're not just like working for me, but just doing things at a very low quality level.
How many clients did you have in April of last year, Matt? And how many do you have now?
It was probably 8 to 10. It was less than 10, but it was probably around 8 to 10 if I remember correctly, somewhere around there.
Okay. Do you remember your income at that time?
It was probably, we're roughly pacing about 100,000 a year. It was like 10 grand a month.
Okay. And do you remember your income in, I guess, like, we started adding automation stuff around like August, September time frame? Tony, do you remember?
Yep, it was right about there. I think September. We kicked it off.
Okay. Do you, I mean, I don't know if I ever asked you that, like, around that time, but like, do you remember where your business was at around that benchmark, and then like give the people a sense of where you're at now?
Yeah, so timeline wise, when I was engaged with Tony, it was probably like we hit a 10K month and we dipped a little bit below. Then right after engaging with Tony, we ended up getting up to like a 50% growth, 15-ish thousand a month. By the time we were doing some of the automation stuff, we were probably doing 20-ish a month, and then to date, we're pacing a little over $500,000 a year, probably 40-50,000 a month. So we've seen a lot of growth since like the initial, like since we initially started working with Tony, that's like 5x growth.
Right.
Awesome.
Tony,
your
your
headcount actually didn't proportionally increase. Like you didn't 5x the amount of people you hired.
No. So whenever I started working with you, it was just me. It was literally me, no one else. Yep. And to this point, we have 2 other people we're hiring on our third. So it's not a 5x headcount increase. And I think a massive part of that was the automation. There's so many things that right now that could be like a full-time person's job. Like reporting, for example, I remember that used to take me hours every single week. That was my time. It's like someone who's like semi-skilled needs to do it to report the things, do it properly. And now I literally press a button once, and something that normally would have taken me 20 minutes is done in 2 seconds. And so I can just do that across. And that was whenever I only had like 10 clients. I can't even imagine right now where I have 25 clients on board, having to spend 30 minutes compiling all the data, doing the reports, manually doing that. Now it's just button press. I add a little bit of notes. It takes me 2 minutes per person. That alone is like massive time. Like, that is something that could have been like a part-time, not quite a full part-time role, but like a significant part of an employee's, role.
Yeah. Plus like all your time as a founder to train that person and make sure it's done accurately. And there's all the risk of it done. Like imagine reporting to a client inaccurate data. Like, I mean, that's not good in terms of that. Is there anything else you want to say about your time with Tony? I mean, you've sort of re-engaged and started doing more ops stuff with Tony recently. What are some of the things so for somebody who's never hired an ops consultant, right? They're a solo founder, or maybe they have a business partner, and they're like operating their business alone effectively, or without an outside ops person, or maybe they have one of the co-founders who's like kind of is more or less in charge of the operations. What are some things that are or were like unexpected benefits for you, or like things you didn't realize before you'd hired Tony that were extremely beneficial for you?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest benefits are like, I kind of just knew. It's just you don't know what you don't know. I knew that the bottleneck was operations, and what I wasn't expecting is the things that were actually like necessary to make sure that organizations are run properly. Like, perfect example is a process map. I would have never thought, I'm like, cool, you're building out flowcharts and stuff. Like, what meaningful growth is that actually doing? Or it's like, cool, we have it drawn out, but like, so what? But that's such like an integral part of okay, now that everything's mapped out, it's very clear and easy to delegate what are the things that can be outsourced. What are the things, like what are the specific day-to-day things? It's just taking all the stuff that in my brain, I'm like, okay, this is what needs to be done in the business, but actually spelling it out, which I didn't realize how useful that is, because now that's on paper, you can start to bring people in, you can start to train, you can start to identify the bottleneck. Like in my head, again, it's like, I know there's an operational problem, but I can't pinpoint and identify, well, what's the specific thing that needs to be done? And so whenever that, like the amount of clarity was probably the biggest on, like, I knew that I needed operational help, but the clarity of like, oh, you just needed this issue. Oh, you just, like, all you need to do is you do the process map, then you do the SOPs, then you get the person in and you train them. And like, it's very linear. Versus in my head, it's just this maze of like, I don't even know what possibly needs to be done. So the amount of clarity was probably one of the biggest unexpected things of, wait, this actually is a lot simpler whenever you just have someone helping you who's done this multiple times and has the experience. So that's probably the biggest unexpected thing. But there's been so many just teachable moments of like learning how to delegate things properly, learning how to build a project management board. What are the important things? How to organize things, how to sort things, how to structure different like things, how to delegate tasks. There's so many of these micro steps that I'm probably taking a lot even for granted now that I can't remember because it's just so second nature. But in the beginning, I had legitimately no idea how to delegate or do practically anything with anyone else in an organization.
Once we introduced Ryan and we partnered up at OpsKings, we introduced the automation component in everything that we're doing. And now, looking back, what are some of the automations that you couldn't imagine like living without today, or some of the use cases that we've been able to automate for you?
Yeah, because it's funny that you say that. It's a lot of the stuff I can't even imagine living without them at this point. Like, so integral to the business. And I think a lot of the value, just from like an enterprise perspective, like what makes this a company and not just like someone in a Slack channel helping you do a product or service, a lot of it is this. It's just like having the flows, having the process, having the predefined stuff. So like a really good example, reporting was a massive one that plagued me every single, like I dreaded Fridays having to go and manually add everything up, and like that was just a nightmare. That was one piece. That time savings, very tangible, like out like multiple hours. And at this point, my time is worth a lot more than it used to be. And so I can't even imagine living without that at this point. Another one is like a lot of there's escalation flows. So there was very not as defined communication between our service fulfillment and our clients. I can go into the super technical stuff for cold email. It's like whenever a prospect whenever our teammate would encounter something that they couldn't handle themselves, we'd have to make sure that we notify it to the prospect. And now we have a very clear and defined flow where whenever an issue occurs, it gets escalated level 1 to me and it gets escalated level 2 to the client. And it's not just like that process, but it's also the automation component of it. There's forms that whenever there's an issue, it's escalated through a form. It's all tracked. All I have to do is press one button if it needs to be escalated to the client. I can jump in and answer it. It's in very clear and easy dashboards for me to use, and make sure that they're handled accordingly. That's another component. Another piece now is project management. Again, could not live without it. Very clear to assign tasks, have all the places where the SOPs and the instructions are stored in one place. There's so many things I can think of just on top. Yeah, like Slack organizational structure. Onboarding is a massive one. Like onboarding, every time a client would get onboarded, I would be sitting there thinking like, man, did I forget to do this? But now it's very clearly mapped out. The channels are automatically created. The to-dos are automatically created. The tasks are automatically assigned. The people, like all the stuff is laid out. The things that I use, like my bandwidth to be able to do the same task has effectively doubled, tripled, quadrupled, or like 10x. And like in the case of reporting, the time it would take me to report on 2 people, I could do all 25 people at this point, or like probably even faster. So there's so many of those just like micro things that add up to, yes, this is like replacing legitimate, like me needing to hire multiple people can just be done seamlessly, cheaply, cost effective, and you get to keep it forever, and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And obviously over the time, you haven't only worked with me, haven't only worked with Ryan. Our team played a big role in, especially on the automation side, just getting everything across. What was your experience working with Steven and then the rest of the team who was supporting you?
Yeah, so Steven's a killer, by the way. The absolutely great guy. So there's a lot. Yeah. Steven's, yeah, no, working with the team, your team's phenomenal. I went a lot from directly working with you, you directly, and then as you guys expand, talking to Steven as account manager. Guy's absolute killer, able to handle everything properly and give a ton of attention to make sure everything's done. Working with Stefan too, absolute killer. Again, knows the stuff very well, very technical. Like, it feels like everything is addressed and handled. It doesn't feel, I think with a lot of agencies, there's a strong degradation in quality, at least at this like smaller stage where you talk to the founder and the founder is very competent, and then you go like one layer deeper and it feels like you basically, you know, aren't even working with the same people anymore. Whereas as you start to hire more, increase headcount, it felt like I had a lot more support. It felt like, yeah, I'm getting the quality of a team without having to hire a team and doing it at a much more cost-effective rate that would take to even, like, I can't even imagine having to manage all these people. Like, I have an idea. If I go to Steven and I have an idea, he goes through, maps it out, pass it over to Stepan. Stepan goes, handles it. I'm sure there's a lot of internal communication between you and the team. I can't even imagine not only the cost and the stress of just even managing one person, trying to do this all myself, which is why, again, you guys absolutely knock it out of the park.
Love it. Tony, any other, I mean, you've been asking some really good questions, Tony. So I feel like I want to pass it off responsibility to you. Any others in your mind?
I would say final thing. Obviously, we've done a lot of cold email specific stuff for you, but for anyone that, you know, runs a marketing agency or runs any sort of other company that is looking to work with us, with OpsKings, what would be, and they're kind of on the edge of thinking about working with us, what would you tell them? Should they go for it? Should they not go for it? If so, what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would say 100% should go for it. I'd recommend to anyone watching this video that hasn't gone on a call with Tony or Ryan or anyone else on the team that you 100% should, because once you get on a call and you explain where you're at and you show that, like, all you need to be is shown what is on the other side of the unknown unknown. I think most people are kind of just going down the path completely blind, unknowing to the different things that can be done without increasing a head count, without things that you realize, like, oh, we might need someone, you know, that is paid $6,000 a month to get done, when in reality it could be done for half the cost or a quarter of the cost, or simply done by a few automations. Or there's repetitive workflow, like you have team members that are just doing things that are super tedious and can be automated. There is so much on this other side of just like talking to Tony and Ryan and getting an assessment of what can be done that you probably didn't even realize is possible. And so that was like, I'd recommend anyone on the fence, like at minimum, if you haven't gone on a call with them, I would just get on a call, see what the capabilities are, because that is, once you realize what you're missing out on, I don't think that there's any reason why you wouldn't want to work with someone who's specialized, understands it. And Tony and Ryan just get it too. Like, whenever it comes to, it doesn't feel like I'm speaking a foreign language to them whenever I talk about my business. They're very understanding and like ear to the ground, they savvy and understand what's going on, and it can help identify the bottlenecks that you might not even know existed. So 100% recommend. If you haven't even gone on a call with them, you should 100% get on a call, talk to them, see what could be fixed, because I think you'd be pleasantly surprised of all the things that you're unaware of that could, you know, be saving you a ton of time and a ton of money.
Well, Matt, I appreciate it so much for the kind words. That's it. That's the video.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys.